Hello, and welcome everyone to the conference hosted by the Atrocity Prevention Lab, hosted by the Signal program at the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. My name is Erica Nelson, and I am the PI and the co-director of the Humanitarian Geoanalytics program at HHI and the director of the Signal program. So this annual conference was born of the Signal program's objective to strengthen the efficacy and efficiency of early warning, early response work through a strategic, evidence-based, and ethical integration of spatial methods, field methods, and novel analytical tools into existing atrocity and conflict prevention decision support mechanisms and workflows. As a background, a couple of years ago, the Signal program conducted a gap analysis looking at the data and analytics utilized to support atrocity and conflict prevention decision-making, programming, and policies. This gap analysis highlighted the fact that while there are a multitude of data streams and really sophisticated algorithmic methods being utilized for conflict and atrocity prevention, usually by academics, governments, INGOs, and intergovernmental agencies, there exists a significant gap between what exists and what is being utilized by frontline atrocity and conflict prevention decision makers. This conference is one of the ways in which we hope to kind of close that gap. So our objectives for this conference are several-fold. We hope to discuss current applications and successes of the use of spatial data and methods for conflict and atrocity prevention work, and to really socialize the value of spatial methods to create impact and reduce the morbidity and mortality of atrocities. We hope to identify gaps, opportunities, and barriers to spatial analysis in atrocity prevention and response. And we really want to begin to break down the silos between different communities working with data to address conflict and atrocities and create a network between and among various stakeholders, and really hopefully to potentiate relationships to foster collaboration. So for this conference, we have disclaimers and expectations, as we all should have. Firstly, our disclaimer: our speakers have been invited to share their personal perspectives based upon their scholarship and their experience, and they do not speak for Harvard. We have a few expectations of you as participants to try to make this a productive and engaging conference. We really want you to actively engage. When speaking or writing, we hope that you use a respectful and professional tone. Certainly use the chat feature to introduce yourself, share your thoughts, and then use the raised hand feature if you want to voice your questions, and we can ask you to come off mute and voice those questions after a speaker presents, or you can utilize the question and answer box to ask questions. We'll be moderating these questions. We'll be looking for your questions. If you accidentally put them in the chat as opposed to the Q&A box, we'll try to transport them over. But really, we want you to be as engaged as possible. Excuse me. Just as a housekeeping note, and so that everybody is aware, we will be recording all of these sessions and uploading them to the Atrocity Prevention Lab website. So if you're concerned about being identified, feel free to stay off camera or change your Zoom name. You can still ask questions via the Zoom chat and you will remain anonymous. But certainly, please feel free to engage. We're here to create conversation. So if your question isn't asked or answered within the time allotted, hopefully we can address them within the chat or asynchronously. Our conference schedule is seen here. We've got a really compelling, diverse morning today for us here on the East Coast. We're looking at, we've got Nathaniel Raymond, who I'll introduce relatively soon. We're very excited to have him speak. And then we go on to look at the role of geospatial data on programs and policy in conflict-prone regions. We hear from Musa, mapping of armed group activities, cross-border movements, and refugee flows in the DRC. And then we move on to a panel thinking about spatial strategies for preventing identity-based violence in urban contexts. And then lastly, we'll wrap up our day with a workshop looking at a visual programming geospatial platform and how it can be used for atrocity prevention. The schedule for tomorrow is on our website, so if you're interested in looking ahead, feel free. Lastly, I do want to note that this conference is only one of our lines of effort in order to reach our objectives at the Signal program. We always welcome more opportunities for collaboration, funding, and ways in which we can increase our impact. Here you will see links to our Atrocity Prevention Lab website and our LinkedIn community of practice. I welcome you to use the QR codes to explore these resources. The links will be put in the chat as well in case you don't have QR capable devices. And certainly, please come be part of our community of practice. If you're interested in increasing your organization's spatial literacy, if you want to discuss a collaboration or a case study with us, or any sort of opportunity to engage. Yeah, and with that, I am beyond honored to introduce to you our keynote speaker. Nathaniel Raymond is Executive Director of the Humanitarian Research Lab at the Yale School of Public Health and a lecturer in the Department of Epidemiology of Microbial Diseases. His research interests focus on the health implications of forced displacement, methods for the assessment of large-scale disasters, and the human rights and human security implications of ICT, information communication technologies, for vulnerable people, and particularly in the context of armed conflict. Previously, he was the director of operations for the George Clooney-founded Satellite Sentinel project at HHI, which utilized high-resolution satellite imagery to detect and document attacks on civilians in Sudan and South Sudan. And subsequently, he was the founding director of the Signal program on human security and technology here at HHI. He went on to be the lecturer of global affairs at the Jackson School for Global Affairs. He has served as a humanitarian aid worker with Oxfam and has formally advised multiple UN governmental and non-governmental agencies, including the UN Department of Peacekeeping Operations in South Sudan, the UN High Commission for Refugees, Save the Children, the International Committee of the Red Cross, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the U.S. Naval War College's Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Response Program, and so many others. His work has appeared in very prestigious journals such as Nature, The Lancet, Annals of International Medicine, Annals of General Psychiatry, Disasters, and so many others. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nathaniel Raymond, our lovely keynote speaker. Nathaniel, we just introduced you. I said a lot of nice things about you. I think, welcome. So excited to have you.
It's an honor to be here, and I'm sorry I missed all the nice things. Now I get to say nice things about you.
Oh, heavens. Well, please feel free if you would like to share a screen, feel free. Otherwise, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much. And I want to start by thanking Erica, Greg, the Signal program, and everyone at the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative for having me here today. It's a real honor to be able to be here, especially at this difficult moment for our field, and both for humanitarians, for human rights professionals, and for everyone who uses geospatial data, and everyone who relies on U.S. government support to do it. I had a lot of things I wanted to say to you today, and I'm going to say some of them, but recent events have changed, I think, what I should discuss. Many of you have probably seen, as of last Friday, that my team, many of whom began at Harvard Humanitarian Initiative, our team at the Yale School of Public Health's Humanitarian Research Lab, was terminated by the U.S. Department of State in work we were doing with geospatial data as part of U.S. support for Ukraine. And I want to talk about the context of what happened to our team, and then use that as a doorway to talk about using our team as a microcosm to talk about two things. One, what we are facing now and what we are going to face in the next few years. And then I also want to use that as a doorway to explain some of the history about how we got to this moment as a field and how some of those historical lessons may help us through this period. So some background, the Yale School of Public Health Humanitarian Research Lab really came to attention in 2022 when we were selected by the U.S. State Department as part of a new program called the Conflict Observatory. And the Conflict Observatory really had its roots at the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative and the Signal program on human security and technology. The Conflict Observatory was set up by the Conflict Stabilization Operations Bureau at the U.S. Department of State to really be what was the Satellite Sentinel project that began in 2011 at HHI on steroids. And it was the first time that the U.S. government gave access to the commercial constellation of satellites to attempt to document crimes in a war even before the war started. And so we began to stand up in February 2022 to try to pre-position our collections of imagery and our collections of open source data to document what we thought was going to happen in Ukraine before the war even started. And so for 3 years, we really focused on three big areas. One is children, and I'll talk about that in a second. The second is classic battle damage analysis, bomb damage analysis at a very large scale of special protected objects such as hospitals, schools, crop storage facilities, transportation infrastructure. And then the third is focused on basically large-scale detention facilities, trying to track where civilians from Ukraine were taken both within occupied territories and within Russia. And what we were documenting was being done with the U.S. Department of Justice, with the Office of the Prosecutor General in Ukraine, and with the International Criminal Court in near real time. And so we were able to collect imagery, fuse it with open source information, and to move those products to prosecutors, not in years, but in days and weeks, and then sometimes to be able to produce maps of trends of attacks as those attacks were still happening. And so the notable success of the program is that we led to the indictment of Vladimir Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova in basically 2 years ago yesterday for the war crimes of deporting children forcibly from Ukraine to Russia into a system of re-education camps, and as we would later document, forced fostering and adoption. And geospatial solutions were essential in being able to track those children. And so what we were doing is taking selfies that Russian officials who were transporting the kids, in many cases by bus or by plane, were taking with the kids as they were brought to midpoint locations or to re-education camps. We extracted metadata from those photos and began to build a tasking plan for satellites to collect more information about those facilities where the children were being held. And that allowed us to show a systematic, intentional network of forced deportation in violation of specifically the Geneva Conventions. And the Geneva Conventions hold that children are have a special protected status in war, and they cannot be used as basically hostages or bargaining chips. Uh, and so, what was radical about Conflict Observatory is that it gave us four things we had always dreamed of having since the days of Satellite Sentinel, which I'll talk about in a second. We'd always dreamed of having one, as unlimited access as possible, not only to very high resolution imagery, but synthetic aperture radar. In some cases, data um, about telecommunications, data about advertising, online advertising data. The second, to have a safe storage environment to be able to put the evidence we collected and the evidence we were building into one repository. The third thing is to have, which we did until U.S. sanctions in the Trump administration canceled it, to have a formal sharing relationship with the International Criminal Court. And so this program was to my knowledge, the only United States entity that was sharing geospatial data and derived products with the International Criminal Court in real time. And the fourth thing it had, which was really unique, is a consortium of partners. It wasn't just Yale. It involved the Smithsonian in the beginning and specialists in creating algorithms. And we had Esri as part of the initial consortium. And so it was a real collection of different types of often geospatially specific skills, from companies to academics to NGOs. And so in the course of those 3 years, we not only led to the Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova indictments, but also 4 additional indictments, 2 for war crimes and 2 for crimes against humanity, related to a geospatial mapping of Russia's alleged attacks on civilian power generation infrastructure in Ukraine. And so we were, within a week of the release of that report, the ICC moved on indictments against 2 officers in the Russian military, one an admiral, one a general, and then basically several weeks later indicted the Minister of Defense and the Chief of Staff of the Army for crimes against humanity. And what was critical in the analysis that we were doing in support of those indictments is we were able to show that Russia was hitting areas far outside the front line, and we were able to show the geospatial distribution of attacks. And we're particularly excited about what that analysis means for the future of spatial methods and technologies for peace, for the documentation of crimes, because it was a combination of the 2 things that really the Conflict Observatory was about. One is being able to do rapid incidental collection of specific incidents, like a specific airstrike, but then be able to have the bandwidth and the level of analytic, human and computing analytic capability to turn those incidents into trend maps to a standard, a chain of custody standard that allowed it to be admissible in court. And so that's the good news. The bad news is on Friday, the New Republic and other outlets reported that the Trump administration canceled our program as we were in the process of transferring all of this geospatial data and open source data to Europol, to the European police agency, to have that data live with them in perpetuity to support primarily Ukrainian domestic prosecutions, but also future prosecutions by any tribunal and by the International Criminal Court. In the next few hours today, there's going to be additional news about this, which unfortunately, even if it was out already, I can't discuss. But you are going to see a lot of attention on what happened and why to our program. And that's really one important thing I want to talk about before I go back in time, because it's not just about our program, it's about all of us. What we do with geospatial data, especially when it is being done in the context of armed conflicts, is very frightening, often to people in power, because what we are doing is providing an often otherwise unavailable empirical insight into the both the actions of alleged perpetrators that can otherwise not be derived from other data, but we're also showing the impact of alleged crimes on populations over time, and in a way, in often a speed during conflicts that is not achievable by other means. And so it is because of the objectivity that we all work towards. It's because of our effort to work on behalf of vulnerable people through principles, the humanitarian principles of neutrality, humanity, impartiality, etc., that we become political. Often, as we strive to transcend politics or avoid politics as a field, we end up smack dab in the middle of politics. And so what I want to say to you is that there is a impulse right now, as funding shrinks, as resources, including access to data, access to partnerships, access to platforms, and then access to cold hard cash to be able to pay yourself and pay your people, as that is shrinking because of the cuts to USAID and US foreign assistance and the follow-on effects, you will feel a strong impulse to do a couple things. To not do politically controversial projects, to avoid mapping things in Gaza, for example. You will feel an impulse to say less than the whole truth about what your data shows. You will try to make people feel comfortable in many cases, and you will want to often comply in advance to what you think the remaining limited pool of funders want. And what I want to say to you today, my message is don't do it. Do not, in this time of constrained resources, change what populations you work on. Do not change the degree to which you tell the truth based on what your findings show. And do not twist yourself into a pretzel because you're scared you're going to lose money. It is better to lose money and go out of business than create a sector, especially in the critical work we do with this unique type of documentation and, yes, truth telling. If you comply, if you contract the space in which we work, if you do not choose to support the populations based on the humanitarian imperative of need, rather than who's going to give you money, then you are complicit. And So we have an essential role to play um, as a sector right now because as money declines for ground-based response, as access to non-permissive environments contracts even further, as conflict spreads, and as spreads because of a lack of resources to respond preventatively and after the fact, we will be called on more and more to step in to provide early warning, to provide emergency response, decision support, and to provide accountability. Um, we cannot um, we cannot shrink in the face of what the populations we serve demand of us, which is to tell the truth. And to tell the truth consistent with these humanitarian principles means that we have to act based on need, even if the funding isn't there. While we were doing Ukraine, we were also documenting attacks on hospitals in Gaza. With Ukraine, we had millions of dollars. With Gaza, we had no money. But we knew that the need for our mapping of attacks on hospitals through the humanitarian principles required us to to do Gaza even if we weren't paid for it. And that was a really important lesson, is that yes, we need to follow the money so we can keep doing our work. But we also have to, like we are distributing food on the ground, as we build maps, as we build products, as we build systems, also be thinking about how do we act based on need. And in that attempt to avoid politics, to transcend politics, we become inherently political as a field. Um, as I said at the beginning, there's a lot of things I wanted to discuss today, including our history, and probably Erica covered it and did it better than I could. But I thought it was really important, especially given the news that will be coming out in the next few hours about our team here and how and why we were terminated, to really try to communicate to all of you both a note of solidarity, but also a challenge, and a challenge for us not to give up, not to give in, and not to have our values dictated by what we're scared of happening. And so we've lost our money. We may have to terminate most, if not all, of our staff in the next 2 weeks. And I couldn't be prouder. Uh, and and so now I'll just do the historical note to close because I have only a couple minutes left. Um, Everything we've accomplished now is because of where we started at Harvard Humanitarian Initiative, because of the risk that Dr. Mike Van Rooyen, Enzo Ballatino, Dr. Enzo Ballatino, and so many took with us when me and Isaac Baker walked in with a check from George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, and Don Cheadle from the cast of Ocean's 11 and said, we're going to monitor um, attacks of the movie star using commercial satellite imagery, which had never been done before at that scale, um, in Sudan and South Sudan. And HHI gave us a space to do something which was crazy, and it worked. And out of that, we were able to build Signal and move from that experiment, which Satellite Sentinel was, using commercial satellite imagery to document attacks on civilians during the partition of Sudan, South Sudan. And we moved from there into developing standards and ethics. And the conference we're at today is really an outgrowth of that journey from an experiment to professionalization, and now to training and scholarship and sharing those insights. And so, at a moment where I could be pretty depressed, um, I feel very happy that seeds that we planted as a community here, um, 14 years ago, have grown in so many ways we never could have predicted. At the heart of it was courage. The courage to try, the courage to risk, and the courage to stand our ground when all the politics seem to say, give up. So here's my closing note. Don't give up. Keep choosing the hard projects. Choose the controversial ones. Do the maps no one's going to make. Work with the communities no one's talking to. Do the 1 hour at night on that crazy project you think won't matter. Because maybe it won't, but maybe it will. And when we stop trying, the world will look like a world where people are not trying to ensure that the capabilities we have are given to the people who need them most, often on the worst days of their life. Thank you.
Natty, thank you so much for that. And I'm very, very sorry to hear about the gutting of your program. And I think we're all feeling discombobulated and overwhelmed with what's going on in the universe right now. But I think that your message is very much needed, very much heard. It's already being echoed in the chat. Like, work with the populations that no one is working with, do the maps that nobody is going to do, spend the time, and don't give up on those values, even though the incentivization mechanisms that we exist in may not support it. I really appreciate that. Um, didn't think I was going to get so emotional early on in the day during this conference. But I think that this is exactly the rallying cry that we need amongst this lovely group of nerds that are doing such hard work. So I really appreciate it.
God bless the
Any
nerds.
God bless the cartographic nerds. I love it so much.
Well,
Um,
thank
it
you for
doesn't
having
seem
me.
absolutely, sir. Really, really honored to have you, and really, really honored to try to expand, bring forward whatever the work, the seed, all of the things that you have accomplished. I'm just really excited to amplify this work.
We have accomplished. Thank you all.
Thank you. Wow. All right, folks. So we are gonna kick it off. So with that, we're actually going to move over to Rosecolette from Pinned. Rosecolette, are you able to share your screen? Are you ready to talk through the programmatic and policy implications of spatial methods? Let's give her, we have a little bit of buffer time. Let's give her a second so that she can set up her computer and share her screen. Wonderful. Again, I do want to remind everybody, we do have that Q&A little button down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. As we have further presentations, certainly put your questions in there. No questions are dumb questions. All questions are welcome as long as they are respectful. And so with that, I'm going to mute myself and hand it over to Rosecolette.
Oh yeah, hi. Good afternoon from here, everyone. And please confirm you can hear me, Juliet. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you, Rosecolette. If you want to put your screen into presenter view, I think that would be better for everybody.
Okay.
Perfect. Wonderful.
Okay. So here we go. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. And oh, I didn't realize I was starting this. But thank you for this opportunity. It's been a good one with you over the years. Yeah, maybe 1 year or more. Okay, so I'm going to be making a presentation on leveraging geospatial data for conflict prevention. And Geospatial data has emerged really as a transformative tool in the effective design and implementation of conflict and atrocity prevention programs over the years, as against the traditional conflict prevention programs in the past. And so in this presentation, we'll be looking at the impact of geospatial data on policy decision making. We would focus on the geospatial data's ability to inform and improve early warning systems, resource allocation, and intervention strategies. We will be looking at the role of geospatial data generally in shaping proactive and effective strategies for conflict prevention and atrocity prevention, and highlight its influence on both program development and policy decision-making processes. So yeah, so we dive in, and I'd like to hover around the map. I'd like to have everyone look at this map. This map pins early warning and early response, call it a conflict map, highlighting pins early warning and early response processes over time. It's a bit, of course, a lot broader than this. I just put in a little bit of it. And so to dive in, why does geospatial data matter in conflict prevention? And so with the global rise in conflicts really and atrocities all over the world, there is a need, a very urgent need, or that came in need, I'd rather say that, to create an effective prevention strategy, an effective strategy, more of away from the traditional strategies where decisions are taken without data. And so considering the complexities really of these conflicts, and mostly attributable, if you ask me, to modern technology, because if we take a look at conflicts from the past, from maybe the First World War, we would have seen a technological advancement and improvement with the Second World War. And then if we also look at that and bring it to today's conflicts and atrocities and all, there's been a lot of improvement, a lot of growth in technology and how these are all driven. So data-driven decisions became imperative, became a very big need, especially to be able to address some of these complexities of the modern conflicts that we see. And so geospatial data came in or have been existing to help to sort of broadly influence how conflicts and atrocity prevention is looked at away from the traditional method that we know. They are useful for better situational awareness. They create enabling and more complete understanding of conflict zones and enhance presentation and visualization really of data that leads to clearer insights and more effective actions in program designs, in intervention designs, and humanitarian assistance, and in every component of atrocity prevention. Now, what are the objectives of the study that went into? To access the role of geospatial data in early warning systems, to identify conflict patterns and emerging threats, to show how geospatial data can be used to enhance resource allocation, ensuring aid reaches the most vulnerable populations efficiently, analyze geospatial data's contribution to intervention strategies leading to more effective and context-aware conflict resolution approaches, and highlight real-world applications and case studies that demonstrate the tangible benefits of using geospatial data in conflict prevention. The methodology here was desktop research. You will agree with me. All over the world, there are a whole lot of resources that address or are addressing geospatial data and its role in conflict prevention, conflict and atrocity prevention. And all the data sets that are accompanied usability, accessibility, and how it provides information generally. There were a lot of peer-reviewed journals that we laid hands on to understand the impact of this geospatial data. And the intervention reports from organizations, especially from UNHCR, that's the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. And there are also case studies of previous atrocity prevention programs that offered real-world examples of how geospatial data is used in practice. So a couple of literature review. This is a slide, so we couldn't have it all on the same table. But hey, I'm going to dwell a lot on the PINS conflict trackers. The PINS conflict trackers were made more effective with the conflict map that I had shown earlier. Indicates conflict trends and patterns in the Niger Delta region. It's a tracker that identifies hotspots and enabling early warning and early response systems, and they are localized. They are community-based. They are actors-based. So there are localized early warning and early response systems to which the trackers speak to. So it's a two-way thing. Trackers get information. To develop PINS conflict trackers, information is generated from a whole lot of studies and a lot of sources. ACLED, the people that are identified as peace champions and peace actors in communities, security agencies, and the PINS trackers also serve these same people. So when some of this information is generated in different ways, this information is also served back to these people for use to influence their decisions, to influence intervention strategies and program designs. Now, the conflict tracker is available, is provided weekly or monthly. However, the information the data that puts these conflict trackers together is generated hourly, daily, minutes by minutes and all. And it's like I said, so these conflict trackers are used for different decision-making purposes. Now, they are used internally within PIND to influence PIND's decision-making processes. PIND has an arm that is called Partners for Peace, Peace for P. Now, this arm has been trained to carry out certain intervention program, conflict program designs and intervention systems. Now, PINS, these conflict trackers and conflict map helps PINS to take decisions, suitable decisions on program design and intervention designs, and especially on funding of some of these kinds of programs. The analysis from the conflict map really also determines where and who to intervene, so that PINS doesn't just think a group of people who are peace actors who have been trained and equipped, of course, without arms to intervene in certain programs, cannot intervene in every kind of program. So the data, the geospatial data provides PINS, or rather influences PINS decision on who to target intervention plans, or who to work with to intervene in certain conflict zones. So there are the cases where it just probably would require an armed group of people, or armed, like if there's an armed group and people cannot engage a group of people to intervene. So maybe PIN at that point would have these trackers or these early warning signs and sent out quickly to security agencies to engage armed groups, if that is the case of armed groups. If it's the case of protests, maybe security forces again. So yeah, I'm trying to say that this data that comes out of PINS conflict trackers influences PINS internal decision-making processes on who to intervene, where to intervene, when to intervene, how much funding might be possible to release for such interventions. Again, the PINS conflict trackers also sort of influences government policies, and this is obtainable. This works only in the Niger Delta because PIN works only in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. So it's the PINS conflict data that have been generated over time has over time influenced government's decision making, and has influenced who the government works with in certain areas, especially when it is conflict related. Like there are the instances of the farmer header crisis sometime in some parts of the Niger Delta. And this also really just doesn't end up with the Niger Delta, because PINS also really works with the national military, security, police, and everybody, and it goes beyond the Niger Delta, yeah. And some of this data comes to also influence the government's decision on who and when to intervene. And so imagine a situation where the problem is there's a farmer header crisis, and then there is the seeds, there are maybe farmers claim the headers have taken over our farms, and then we need to go back to farm if the food security will be sustained within the country, and then the government can intervene with they can generate a decision by the government to say, okay, let us support local seeds or finance seeds for farmers to go back to the farm, and then maybe see, okay, what are actually the sources of these conflicts, and then target if these conflicts are poverty-driven, unemployment-driven, and then the government can also come in to take decisions on how to mitigate such conflicts using such opportunities. So we also looked into the Amnesty International's journals. There's been a lot where they emphasize the role of geospatial mapping in visualization for the provision of humanitarian assistance and decision making. And they described this satellite imagery of burned villages in northern Nigeria, and had emphasized that these kinds of atrocities required certain kinds of humanitarian assistance, because they sort of understood that humans were trapped in some of these burning houses, or in their hideouts, or in places where the only way, according to a map, the only way to get to these people might be deploying chopper, or just finding a way that is not on foot, because a mapping system has shown an imagery of what the area looks like and how it is that this is some of the core values of geospatial mapping. It helps identify hotspots, refugee maybe hideouts, and maybe refugee ways where refugees can be engaged, maybe where humanitarian assistance can be provided for people who are victims who are in these kinds of situations, and maybe how rescue can come to these people. Some South African journals also had highlighted how geospatial visualization of geospatial data allows for spatial visualization of areas in conflict, and helps identify the types of resources at stake at those populations, or the populations that may be affected by the conflicts, that informs intervention plans. So they described how geospatial mapping has helped organizations, governments, and interested parties identify the kind of resources that are in the conflicts, so that also sort of helps them take a decision of how to match that kind of conflict situation, who to deploy and how to deploy. So considering geospatial mapping in early warning systems leads to a more inclusive and comprehensive responses, and has been recognized as an invaluable tool and a decision support system, and has the potential to assist in conflict resolution. The other source literature reviews are carried out into geospatial and conflict prevention that reveals a growing recognition of its potential to transform early warning systems globally, yeah, and resource allocation strategies and intervention methodologies, really. And the synthesis of these articles and organizational reports and case studies illuminates both the promise and the challenges of integrating these technologies into the field of atrocity prevention. Of course, a lot of challenges which will be highlighted later, especially in the areas of knowledge and knowledge gap, capacity gap. So these are some of the areas that geospatial mapping has come to help early warning systems. It has improved early warning by mapping violence, stress, and hotspots, enhance resource allocation, and improves intervention strategies by enabling timely and informed policy decisions. Then what are some of the findings of this study? Some of the findings of this study is like earlier highlighted, that geospatial data influences targeted decision making. And like I said, it happens in several ways. It influences organizations, program decisions, and intervention strategies. How, like I said, how to approach, when and where, who approaches, and how can the program be designed. It also influences governmental policy decisions, like I said, and helps with plans of what agency can be more effective in what area, so that it's understood that when you do a mapping, you understand sometimes that, okay, this is not a peace enforcement, so let's just find a peacemaking organization to have a first footing. Okay, this is, let us deploy maybe even community-driven approaches, but it actually really influences decision-making and program designs and how to engage. And then most importantly, it influences budgetary allocations and funding for specific agencies and programs. Like I said earlier, geospatial mapping helps to identify resources in conflicts. So that also helps to identify what funding sources or what kinds of funding can go to what kind of agencies for those kinds of future interventions, with in understanding the resources at stake. Now, the geospatial data also informs targeted data-driven interventions. So it is believed that traditional intervention mechanisms just I don't want to imagine how it used to happen, but I could imagine that people could have just carried out certain conflict prevention or atrocity prevention interventions without probably having adequate data of exactly the number of, let's say, what quantity of humanitarian assistance you need. Are you going to oversupply or undersupply? Maybe what quantity, what the hostility, or to what level has it, at what level is it? Is it de-escalating? Is it still escalating? Is it at a latent stage? How do you approach? And so that is what geospatial data helps to do. It helps to address, to influence targeted data-driven interventions, so that at the point of intervention, a group, an organization, a government, or any agency that is interested or carrying out this would have already ready data and has an idea what to face in such interventions. There is also the enhanced resource allocation. I had said that before. Geospatial data informs resource allocation for different kinds of interventions, as long as the data is provided. And it helps to predict conflict patterns as well. And this is also something that PIN's early warning systems also helps to do. Predict conflict hot zones, hotspots, conflict trends in different parts of the communities. And this also goes back to inform decisions, government policy decisions at the government level, and organizational decisions about travels, about movement, and a whole lot of things. So geospatial data is able to identify what is happening where, what usually happens where, what are the dynamics, and or what can happen, and then predict sort of future occurrences from that. And then it helps to improve early warning systems and improve situational awareness. So this is PIN's early warning tracking system. If you can see this, so it has data sources, and like I said, these data sources come from, if you can see my cursor, these data sources come from different agencies. It comes from the what we call the P4P SMS platforms. Like I had described earlier, it's a community-driven approach where individuals send SMS at eyewitness SMS, on the spot SMS, for collation and then for quick intervention. Nigerian Watch, the ACLED, these are all sources of data. And then there's a mapping platform where these whole things are mapped. If you look at the mapping platform very well, you see the hotspots, you see there is a legend that describes what happens in each of the places. And then this also goes back to early warning products, the conflict trackers, like I had said earlier, and feeds back into the same people, some of these people who information is generated from, and the general public, to inform decisions, to inform program interventions, and it also really enhances collaborative efforts. So it also makes for efficient targeting of high-risk areas, ensuring that resources are directed where they are needed most. And this really improves humanitarian response. It helps with informed policy decisions. Here it says informs context-sensitive policies that leads to more effective and sustainable peace-building efforts and allows for timely and informed policy decisions. And not just this, and timely early responses as well. So in conclusion, study explored critical role of geospatial data in conflict prevention, and it's evident that geospatial data technologies offer advantages in identifying risk patterns and monitoring conflict dynamics, integrating geospatial data into atrocity prevention efforts, and improves situational awareness and strengthens policy responses, through enhanced analysis. So geospatial data really helps for enhanced analysis of what is happening in a place, what are the trends, how can this be mitigated? What are the intervention plans? How can the program be designed to suitably provide effective responses to individual scenarios? There is also it helps with informed decisions, like I said, and improved prevention. Because this can also help with mitigating some of these conflicts and atrocities for the future. So it's optimal utilization requires strategic investment, interdisciplinary cooperation, and continuous refinement of analytical methods. The interdisciplinary cooperation, very importantly, so that agencies, organizations, governments are not working in silos, working together to address some of this as they come. So there are 3 recommendations here that the development organizations should scale the use and adoption of geospatial mapping. And this is very important. Like I said, so that organizations are not working in silos, it is important that organizations who are working in the conflict and atrocity ecosystem come together and put their resources together and share resources collaboratively, such that every organizations can be everywhere at the same time. So the collaborations help with providing informed data, providing decisions, and providing data-driven interventions, even in areas where they are not. And then there is a capacity building, which is very highly important. It's not enough to work collaboratively. There is also a need for organizations to build capacities, not just for themselves, but for security agencies as well, so that everybody can be able to use geospatial mapping systems, every technology that is available, and then they can work together on conflict and atrocity prevention. This also will help policymakers and program design to prioritize cross-sector collaborations and integrate. And then another recommendation is to integrate crowdsourced data with official security intelligence to make it more efficient. And then future research should focus on real-world cases, and policy implementation gaps where they are existing. Okay, so this is the end of it, and I ended with a quote to say geospatial data is not just about maps, it's about saving lives through informed action. So thank you. I'm here if you need anything.
Rosecolette, thank you so much for that presentation. We're running a little short on time, so if you have a minute to just look at the Q&A, there's a couple of questions for you. I think that this is an excellent kind of foray into like the next steps, and really great to hear kind of the concrete ways in which geospatial data is actually leading to impact. I think that's really what we're trying to achieve here. We're not trying to be just academicians. We're trying to achieve true impact. And I think that this is really great evidence. So thank you so much. For those of you who had questions in the chat, or in the Q&A box in the chat, hopefully we can answer them asynchronously, but I do want to move along. And Rosecolette, if you could stop sharing your screen, and we're going to move on to Musa and his presentation, which is going to be tremendous, and I'm really looking forward to it. Musa, you can share your screen as soon as you can.
Yes. Can you confirm if you can hear me, please?
We can hear you, sir.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and share my screen in just a moment. Sorry about that.
All right. Despite years and years and years of Zoom, there's always going to be some version of technical difficulty.
Yeah, but I'm almost getting there now.
Trying again.
Can you see it?
We can. There's a strange box to the right.
Okay.
I think that might be your Zoom box. Yeah. There it goes. That looks perfect.
All right, so thank you very much, everyone. My name is Musa Thiong'o, and I am glad to be presenting this project. It's something which I have been working on in about a month or so, following our very awesome workshop which we had last year around September with the Atrocity Prevention Lab, and it's but we are using GIS to look or map the armed group activities, cross-border movements, and refugee flows, a case of Eastern Democratic of Republic of Congo. And just a moment. And we will be looking at the different components of this study, and we'll be dealing mostly on the spatial questions, the case on the ground, and the outcomes based on the data set which is readily available, open data which is available out there. And we will look at some of the issues or considerations that we can put into consideration to mitigate some of the harmful effects that can come out in the case of looking at this case on the ground. And we will wrap it up by looking at the limitations and some of the gaps which I believe, if well taken care of, the spatial information can really be helpful in looking at the situation on the ground. So just to establish the context of the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's a huge country in the central part of Africa, and the land, especially the eastern part of the country, has been plagued with a lot of conflicts, and this has involved a lot of players, the non-state actors, that is the armed groups, and the government forces, which over many things fight for different things, one of them being the control of resources. And there is not much being mentioned about this by different places of the from the media, like we have seen with other areas like the Ukraine and Gaza. But this is a situation or a place where a lot is happening, and especially if you have been keen on the recent past, on the end of January, there was conflicts, especially in the area of Goma, and a lot of people were displaced. And confirmed reports have shown that over 15 million children have suffered the impacts of these armed conflicts. among others, hunger and outbreak of diseases. So this forms as a great part to study and apply the spatial questions. And in the past few years, you have heard of cases of outbreak of zoonotic diseases, Ebola, and this has also cost a lot of people in losing their lives. So the special questions which we are looking at today is the activities of the armed groups, and we would want to know the locations that they control and how frequently do the violent incidents or these atrocities are being reported. We also look at the cross-border movements, the refugee routes, the point of entry and exits to countries like Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, as well as Tanzania, because it's also a key border which stretches, I guess, the longest border of the three countries which are listed here. And it receives quite a number of refugees from this area. Also, closer to that is the refugee flows, the demographics, how many numbers of people, the children disaggregated by gender, how many of them do cross these borders and to where, in respect to where they are coming from, that is the Democratic Republic of Congo. That one is, the other part we look at is the resource distribution. The eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo is known to be very rich in minerals, different kinds of minerals, the diamonds, tourmaline, copper, and cobalt. I mean, that's not the end of the list, but this is the place where we see much of the conflicts being meted on the populations. So how is this related to the activities which are happening on this area? The other one, which is of interest, but I haven't dwelt on it on these studies, the zoonotic diseases. And we've seen from the reports the outbreak of diseases such as measles, epidemics of cholera, Ebola, Mpox epidemic. So these are other parts, components of the study which could be very important to take, to consider as part of the spatial questions. But I didn't have enough time to look at it in this one. So the defined relationships for the study is how the armed groups violence has caused the increase of refugee flows and displacement within and without the borders of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the cross-border routes, even though not well defined, these are the routes that the displaced persons have used to cross over to other countries or even to other regions, so to those who are the internally displaced persons. And the resource control by the armed groups, which we've seen from various reports that they are the major profiteers and they've been recorded to be picking tax and to enforce laws on where the artisanal mines are located. Also look at the conflict hotspots, and this is will be in relationship to the where the mines or natural resources or other resources are located. The population of interest for this study, of course, is the local population, the children, men and women of Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, refugees, those who have fled to neighboring countries, IDPs, those who are still within the bounds of Democratic Republic of Congo. Also dwell a little bit on the host communities, those people who receive these people once they flee their regions. There is also the armed groups. You've seen that there are so many different kinds of facets of actors, non-state actors in the Eastern Democratic of Congo, and we will be interested to see the role they play in perpetuating this conflict. The scope of the question, we are looking at the start of the violence. Well, it's said that the violence started in 1997, and that's the data set which is available to 2024 when this was being done, but there is a predecessor data set for 2025. I believe, up until February or even the first weeks of March. But that's the scope of the analysis. And the location is Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, as was introduced in the topic. So there are many sources of data set, and really thankful to the various people who put this together. They help people in different ways, children, women, and men in various capacities to ensure that this data is being used in the best of ways to help mitigate the conflicts on the ground. I won't go on each one of it, but I will mention that the analysis which was able to conduct heavily used the ACLED data and the humanitarian data, and also IPs. As you can see in this section here of resource distribution, if you can see my cursor. So moving forward, looking at the methods and the data processing, most of the data set which is used is in form of either polygons or points, indicating resources, or the action, the points where activities are happening. That is, atrocities are happening. So the first of them was cleaning the data set. Much of it is not into its best usable form, so duplicates, inconsistent records, wording was looked at and rectified, and the standardization of the data into a local projection system was conducted. There is also the aggregation of these data as it was coming in different provinces. So looking at the three provinces, the South Kivu, Tanganyika, and North Kivu. So this data set was aggregated to form part of the analysis. And the transformation is the refugee flows into a direction from a point in the research was focusing on Goma and the flow of refugees into the neighboring countries, and also the resource locations heat map was produced to show where likely an activity or atrocity might happen, and if an armed group is present in the location. The data analysis part will involved cross-border analysis and using buffer zones where there is artisanal mining. It's most likely that there is an armed group controlling that site to be profiteers and do the enforcement so that they can pick taxes from the people who are doing those activities. So an analysis of around 20 kilometers radius was done to see the likely areas whereby atrocities might be occurring. And this was well correlating with the fatalities dataset analysis from the dataset acquired from ACLED, and most of the fatalities were happening within these regions or these buffer zones. As the hotspot analysis, as mentioned in the previous slide, won't dwell much on that. We'll see it on the previous and in the next slides. Is the proximity analysis, and this was checking on the distances from the camps to hotspots where these people go to or flee to. The possibilities of atrocities happening to them, or how far are these atrocities happening. For instance, you'll see people moving to areas, but the advancing situation of the atrocities will just meet them where they relocate to, and that's why you find most of them moving out of the bounds of the country. So that one is looked at. Some of the sub-analysis from the dataset, the demographics mentioned, the age, gender, and all that, the temporal analysis. I'll mention that this was not completed, but it's something in line based on the dataset that we will acquire. So using the Getty's odd G-star analysis in in the GIS software, we were able to see the clustering, to highlight the high areas of conflict hotspots. And this was based on the number of fatalities over from 1997 to 2024 December. And this correlates well with the areas where we have many fatalities occurring and people moving out. And this is North Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri provinces, as indicated or shown there. So this is the flow from the areas whereby atrocities are being experienced, and it shows that there's a significant number of people moving to Tanzania, even though it wasn't included in part of the countries where we are looking at, and that can be seen. And there is high number of children and people below 17 years who are, being affected by this prolonged crisis in Eastern DRC. As shown, Uganda, one of the thing which was observed here is that Uganda received, this data is up to 2023, and Uganda has received the most refugees and asylum seekers. And maybe these can give some other aspects, not alluding to be it, but from the reports, there seems to be some, hostility between countries receiving these people, and their governments might not be accepting them directly, and this could be resulting to some of them moving to Uganda in that case. So that's it there. So on the this is the context showing the natural resources, that is the minerals. You can see most of the artisanal mines are situated on the eastern part of the country, and this is where most of the atrocities are being experienced, and of course fatalities that's causing people to move to the neighboring countries. So this sits well, and the dotted polygons you see underneath is the buffer zone, and these, when overlaid with the ACLED data of fatalities, really speaks to the volume or number of people who have died or been killed by the state or non-state actors in these operations. So the outcomes of these report is actually mainly aimed at informing the early warning, early action systems on the ground. We understand that there are many organizations, non-governmental organizations, which are working in Eastern DRC Congo, and once they have this information, it will be vital for them. And maybe speaking of World Vision, for instance, where I serve, they deal with the cause of children, the children who have been affected. Having this data would be really, would be really important to know where to take the aid or the humanitarian aid, and on timely basis, such as medication to the displaced population. So knowing the spatial locations of the displaced people, the routes they are taking, maybe so that we can target them at the entry and exit points, is very important to inform such strategies, and also resource allocations to allow the programs or the NGOs to target the regions for easy and equitable distribution of the resources to the displaced persons. So the other part is on the programmatic design, and I believe this study, if completed to the last bit of it, can really help in the designing of conflict-sensitive interventions in such contexts, such as the Eastern DRC, even South Sudan, and other contexts can be informed by the outcome of this study. So this is a continuation, and this is the impact on policy. Just have alluded on it, and this work will provide the evidence, the needed evidence, and as you heard from our keynote speaker, this is such impactful information in contexts which have been having issues. So There are many ethical considerations. Won't dwell much on them, but you understand in working in context where it's fragile, so you're really calling for great care when handling this data set to have effective and impactful outcome. So, and much of this is done by the publications, the data set which was used and which is readily available there. There is a lot of anonymization while still making it usable for the impact needed. So the limitations, there are gaps, as with any other data set. There are gaps and there are some questions which would really need the granularity of the data set to be high. For instance, tracking the movements of these people as they cross the borders. So that data set is not there. We have the point of action and the last point where they settle, but in between is some of the information, spatial information that might be really helpful moving forward. So dissemination is, of course, working with the organizations of the ground, having the policy manuals and maps and dashboards showing real-time insights. And this is one thing which is done by ACLED. They have the monitoring tools that help inform the likelihood of an event happening, and this has been really helpful on the ground. So I want to say thank you to these organizations for providing the dataset, as well as the HHI, the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. And this is so because of the workshop that they, gave us last year, and has, really informed my presentation. Thank you very much, and welcome any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Musa, really compelling work, really exciting, kind of bringing together of stochastic variables that influence conflict. I think that I'm really curious to see how work like this will go on to actually inform programming and policymaking. I think that you laid out quite a lot of different opportunities for this work to change how we think about like resources and how it influences conflict. Think about like refugee flows, IDP flows, thinking about vulnerable populations such as children. There's just so much richness there. So really thank you for presenting. I think other people are quite excited about your work as well. There is somebody who in the Q&A wants to connect with you because they are also doing work in the DRC. So just one more kind of collaboration opportunity, perhaps. But I don't think that we have any other specific questions from the group. So I think with that, I'm going to say thank you, and then we will move quickly into a 10-minute break. And then we are very excited to bring everybody back for our panel. But in the meantime, I'm just going to share my screen. Again, feel free to go to our website to, of course, it's going to take a minute to look appropriate. Go to our website, join our LinkedIn, do all those sorts of things. Make sure you stand, get some water, take care of yourselves while we are kind of on break. And we will see you folks at 35 past the hour, whichever hour you guys are in. Welcome back, everyone. Uh, I am really, really excited about this next set of speakers. I'm really excited to hear kind of everybody's perspectives and their work with regards to mapping peace, spatial strategies for preventing identity-based violence in urban contexts. As everybody on this call knows, conflict, atrocities are happening more and more in urban spaces. And I think this is an exceptional and really timely panel for us to all engage with. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists. And that's it. That's all I got to say. I'm excited. This is going to be fantastic.
Thank you so much, Erica. Can you hear me okay? Yes, we're good. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jai-Ayla Sutherland. I'm a program officer on the Mass Violence and Atrocities team at the Stanley Center for Peace and Security. Today, I have the honor of introducing and moderating this panel because of my role as an editor of a forthcoming volume, Identity-Based Mass Violence in Urban Contexts, Uncovered. Your panelists today have all contributed to this volume, which aims to build a field around the concept of identity-based mass violence, bringing together practitioners in the disciplines of atrocity prevention, peace building, and urban violence reduction. The editors of this volume include Rachel Locke, director of the VIP lab at the University of San Diego's Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice, Andre Serban-Pont, president of CRIAS in Argentina, and Kelsey Paul-Shantz, also program officer at the Stanley Center. We want this volume to meet readers in a way that connects their minds and hearts. As a result, it has two types of contributions, those that are academically researched and peer-reviewed, and others that are more personal and artistic. These pieces focus on the lived implications of the problems and solutions connected to identity-based mass violence. We used cities as our primary geographic focus for two reasons. First, increasingly, the majority of humanity resides in cities. And second, cities tend to be forgotten within the space of atrocity prevention, but are key actors in addressing both the structural root causes of mass violence, as well as chronic and spectacular violent events. As a result, this volume uses academic rigor and individual testimony to bring to life the concept of identity-based mass violence. It creates space to have a human-centered conversation, even while engaging with a complex subject. Given its focus on cities, space and place are key components throughout the volume. Today, we have 4 individuals representing their 3 chapters that are particularly relevant in terms of data, spatial analysis, and prevention. It is my honor to introduce them. ElsaMarie da Silva is the founder of Red Dot Foundation in India and president of Red Dot Foundation Global in the US. She created the platform Safe City, which crowdsources personal experiences of sexual violence and abuse. Her work has been recognized by the UN Secretary General, UN Alliance of Civilizations, German Federal Foreign Office, and others. Michal Braier is an architect and urban planner specializing in urban political geography. She holds a PhD from Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. Michal serves as head of research and publications at BIMCOM, Planning and Human Rights. She is also a teaching fellow at the Urban and Regional Planning Institute at Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Efrat Cohen is an architect and urban designer. She is co-executive director of BIMCOM, Planning and Human Rights, where she manages the East Jerusalem and the Urban Renewal departments, and has served as deputy director of planning. Natalia Garcia Cervantes is a research professor at Tecnológico de Monterrey and holds a PhD from the University of Manchester. Her ethnographic work draws on adapting ecological frameworks to explore perceptions of violence and insecurity in Mexico in order to identify risk factors at differing social levels. After their presentations, we will be glad to take questions from the audience, and we'll start our presentations with Elsa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you to the organizers for having me. I am the founder of Red Dot Foundation and Red Dot Foundation Global. They are nonprofits in India and the US. And our mission is ending violence against women and girls through education and advocacy using crowdsourced data. So I started on this topic around 12 years ago as an immediate response to a horrific incident that took place in India where a young woman was gang raped on a bus in Delhi. And what I figured was that not only am I a survivor, but around me there were a lot of survivors who were triggered to share their own stories, making us realize how vast this kind of violence is. 1 in 3 women on an average experience some form of it, and it ranges from physical forms to non-verbal, verbal, and now that we live in a digital age, even digital forms of violence. And they experience it at least once in their lifetime, yet 80% choose not to talk about it. And what does that mean? This statistic is so important because it means that official statistics do not reflect the true nature and size of the problem. It has a data gap with the official statistics. And while sexual violence is an entire spectrum of abuse, because it's normalized as part of our daily routine, we tend to accept it, we tend to shrug it off, and we contribute to perpetrating that violence in this culture of insecurity. And it makes the problem invisible because of the lack of data. But it has real-time effects on people, especially the survivors who it affects their mental health, their access to opportunities, and also their quality of life. So what do we do at Safe City, which was launched 10 days after the gang rape of Jyoti Singh in December 2012? We are making the invisible visible. So Safe City is a global platform for anonymous reporting. It's completely in line with GDPR. We are not collecting any personal detail. The aim is to encourage people to document their incidents, personal incidents, or if they have witnessed the violence. And this data is then collated as location-based trends visualized on a map as hotspots. So on the left of the screen, you will see that the map is zoomed into New York City. There are red bubbles with numbers in them, and each of those numbers represents a story. So you can drill down right up to the street level and check out what people have experienced in that particular location. And the idea is not just to make it visible, but to provide actionable insights. That means location, time of day, day of week patterns of the types of violence so that we can invite solutions. And that is the most exciting part of our work. The unique features of our application are, one is the anonymous reporting. Like I mentioned, it's completely in line with GDPR. We are not asking for any individual emails, phone numbers, social media profiles. We are not even collecting IP addresses. Uh, every report is read before it's published on the front end. In addition to that, we have built this from a survivor-centric viewpoint in the UX UI design. And the added features, we are mapping the violence not only as per the gender, but also intersectionality. So disability, ethnicity, migrant status, climate change, and so on. So it helps us understand the violence. This is just a snapshot of our data to help you understand what kind of trends that are showing up. So we have data from urban and rural areas. We have data from 86 countries at this point. Most of the perpetrators are male, and most of the survivors who are reporting are female. We have a very younger age group that is using our application, which is no surprise because of their comfort with technology. And of course, there is primarily the gender-based violence focus, but also there's intimidation and bullying, the focus of violence on sexuality for the LGBTQ group. And also there is some people are reporting intention to assault. But what's also surprising is the time of day patterns, which urban planners or city officials or transport officials may not even think of because it's not necessarily their lived reality. Our peaks are between 5 and 7 p.m., where in certain parts of the world, like India, it's not a lighting issue. It's happening in broad daylight. And this really helps them think through their own role in creating safer spaces, in developing cities that are safe. So our systems change approach is really using data to engage communities and institutions to take action. At the individual level, it's more about understanding your rights, understanding, being more situationally aware when you're accessing spaces, but also finding solidarity to break the silence. As part of communities, which we all are, how can we use this data set to highlight the problem, but also demand for solutions and accountability from our institutions? And at the institution level, what is the role of these institutions in implementing laws and policies? We work closely with the police in several areas, with the city, with transport, with religious leaders, and also with many grassroots organizations. These are just some stories that we have about individuals. So Shalini is a young girl who had a problem using the transport to go to school from her village. And when she realized that it was not just her experience alone, she and her friends mobilized their parents to actually get private transportation so that they can go to school without being touched, groped, and in a frame of mind that they could learn, because they all have aspirations for higher education. Manoj, on the other hand, was part of a group of perpetrators who had never been challenged about their inappropriate behavior. They weren't aware of the laws, they weren't aware of the punishment associated with their behavior, and they clearly thought they were having fun, but didn't realize that, sexual harassment constitutes a crime under Indian law. And when they were invited to hear the stories of these women and girls in their community, it had an impact on them. And he signed up to be a peer educator and is now an ardent advocate for safety. As mentioned, we have received shout outs from the UN Secretary General for our youth program to break the silence, but also Hillary Clinton, who referenced Safe City as a tech for good in a world where we are always suspicious of technology. Some examples of how we have used the data in different parts of the world. For example, our partners in Kibera in Kenya, Nairobi, have used the data to map out the violence, but also engage religious leaders to talk to men and boys. And religious leaders are huge influencers. And when they take a stand against gender-based violence, it has an immediate effect in their community. But even they have submitted our data to their country's voluntary reporting on SDGs, especially on violence against women and girls in cities and communities. They've used radio to educate parents and teachers about the different forms of violence. So storytelling is very important and it's very contextual to location. In the Philippines, in Quezon City, the mayor, Joy Belmonte, was very supportive of the application. She endorsed it, invited her community to report on it, and her teams at the local level of governance would monitor the application in real time and then invite the community to come and understand resources better. Resources that were officially part of the governance structures, which were in place but not being used. Often there's a low trust between communities and institutions. And what they found was because they were able to respond to what was happening in real time, they were able to get more people to use their services, indicating that there is a need to build trust between the two sides. In Brazil, for example, in a little town called São Lourenço, our partners identified a gas station as a potential hotspot. And this was a hotspot on trafficking. And many women said that they were able to escape, but they didn't feel safe. And this data was then presented to the mayor as well as the police. And then they took steps to make that space safer. So we have many stories in different parts of the world. I invite you to check out our web application or download the app on iOS and Android. Please try reporting even a past incident so that you get into the habit of breaking the silence and encourage others to do so. And more importantly, take action. Thus far, we've impacted over 1.5 million people through our stories and our partnerships, and we have won several awards. So thank you very much, and I look forward to interacting with you.
Michal and Efrat, please feel free to come on in. And thank you so much, Elsa.
Thank you, Elsa. That was great. So I'm going to try and share, and I hope it works. Can you see my screen? Okay.
You're good.
No. Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you for having us here. We come from an organization called BIMCOM, who deals with planning and human rights. And we're based in Jerusalem, in Israel, Palestine. So I'm sure at least some of you have heard the news from this morning and from the last period. And I will start with a small disclaimer. We finished researching this particular piece at the end of September 2023. It was the Jewish New Year's Eve. Public turmoil was already very high in Israel against a very extremist right-wing government, but we couldn't anticipate the merciless bloodshed that would swipe through the region just a few weeks later. Hamas's brutal attack on Israel's southern region triggered extreme Israeli violence in Gaza, killing tens of thousands and razing its urban fabric to the ground. And we were very, very sorry to hear that the ceasefire this morning was broken again. So Israeli violence against Palestinians takes many shapes and occurs at many different scales and times. In this intervention, we focus on structural, systematic, and bureaucratized violence against Palestinians as it manifests through different tools of urban planning, building regulations, and construction enforcement. And we will focus on the city of Jerusalem. So this is just a general map of where we are. This is Jerusalem. So just a little bit of background for anyone that doesn't really know the context. Jerusalem has been the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and a focal point of national, religious, and political debates. And while peace negotiations often talk about whether we should, is this a shared city or a separate city, everyday realities are deeply segregated and unequal. So before 1967, Jerusalem was basically two cities. One is the Western city, the Israeli city, and the second one was under Jordanian rule, the Palestinian city. Immediately after the 67 war, Israel changed the boundary of Jerusalem to this black line here on the map, and enlarged the municipality and unilaterally annexed the eastern part into Israel. But the Palestinian residents of the city were not afforded citizenship. Rather, they have a liminal status of being residents, permanent residents, which does afford some rights, such as freedom of movement, employment, some social benefits, but they don't have voting rights, and their residency can be revoked. So in this unified city, as Israel calls it, one of the main aims was to achieve Jewish geographic and demographic dominancy over the city, and this was done by building large Jewish neighborhoods in the area annexed. So here we see, in blue, you see the new Jewish neighborhoods that were built beyond the Green Line. And what you see in sort of this yellowish orange are the Palestinian neighborhoods. So when we talk about East Jerusalem, we're actually talking about the Palestinian neighborhoods of East Jerusalem. And while many of these policies were aimed at restricting the Palestinian population within the city and pushing it out of the city, we still see that if we look between 1967 and 2021, Palestinians population actually went up, relatively up, from 26% to 39%. So today, Palestinians are almost 40% of the residents of the city. In the beginning of the 2000s, the separation wall was built, which is here, the black line, the black dark line, which made it harder for Palestinians to move back and forth from the West Bank into Jerusalem, and had, again, very harsh consequences to the Palestinian population of the city. But if we look at planning and building policies, we see that on the one hand, the Palestinian population, as I said, is rapidly growing, and also the housing units are accordingly on the rise. The number here, this almost 65,000, is an estimated number. There's probably much more housing units today in the city, and it is estimated that about 50% of these housing units are informal housing units. Why are they informal? Because as you see in the upper graph, it's very difficult to get a building permit in East Jerusalem. There are no outline plans, there are no master plans, or they are outdated, or there are a lot of other different restrictions. And so most of the people actually have no choice but building their house without a permit. These houses are often targeted by home demolitions. And so here you see the numbers of, again, East Jerusalem versus West Jerusalem. You see the opposite from what we saw before. So there are much more demolition orders and actual demolitions in East Jerusalem if compared to West Jerusalem. And we also need to remember that these demolitions have they are of a different kind, because in East Jerusalem, usually it's a whole house. It has sometimes multiple housing units, multiple families living in it. Whereas in West Jerusalem, usually when there is a demolition, it would be a little addition, or someone, added a room or something like that. So also that's not reflected in the numbers, but there's also a big difference of what is actually being demolished. So these policies of restricting urban planning, of restricting construction, and of home demolitions are actually adding up to a very discriminatory planning policy that is specifically targeting Palestinians in Jerusalem. But we don't want to leave it just at the numbers. We wanted to our chapter brings two testimonies of people who had their homes demolished that we talked to in a neighborhood called Ashayach, which you see here. So I'm going to turn it now over to Efrat, who's going to read us one of these testimonies. And I'm going to leave the slides, okay?
Okay, thank you, Michal. Ibrahim was born in 1968 in Ras El Amud, a neighborhood of Jerusalem, to a Palestinian refugee family. He is the youngest of 12 siblings. His family is originally from the village of Colonia, west of Jerusalem, where they lived until 1948. During the 1948 Nakba, the family fled east, first living in Jericho and later settling in Jordanian Jerusalem. The small house in Ras El Amud is only about 50 square meters. In 1967, the neighborhood, like the rest of East Jerusalem, came under Israeli rule. In 2000, before Israel began building the separation barrier, Ibrahim moved to the neighborhood of ElsaMarie, a Palestinian suburb of Jerusalem outside the municipal boundaries. But when the Israeli authorities began revoking residency status from Jerusalemites living outside the municipal area, Ibrahim and his family began moving back and forth between his parents' home within the city and their own house in ElsaMarie. In 2006, he finally managed to buy a house within the city boundaries in the neighborhood of Wadi Abdallah. The house was small, only 2 rooms on a 400 square meters plot, yet it allowed the family to stay in their own home, eliminating the need to constantly move in and out of the city. The house was built in the 1990s without a building permit, but has not received a demolition order. To make a living, Ibrahim built a small body shop which provided income for the next 17 years. When his sons began marrying, he added 2 rooms and a shower to the small house, but the legal proceedings were quickly to hit. Enforcement deputies began visiting the house. One time, just hours before his daughter's wedding, when the guests were in the living room. The memory of that moment still painful for him. It brings tears to Ibrahim's eyes. It burns you from inside, he said. For years, Ibrahim tried to save the house in every possible way. He went through 16 different legal proceedings, spending time and money with no success. In 2018, it became clear there was no way to save the house. Ibrahim decided to demolish it, the house and workshop himself, in order to avoid the extra fine the authorities charge when they carry out the demolition. When the enforcement officer overviewing the demolition demanded that he demolished the original house too, despite not being included in the demolition order, Ibrahim refused to obey. Troubles make you old and sick, Ibrahim tells us. After this traumatic experience, Ibrahim sold the lot with the demolished house on it and left Wadi Abdallah. He returned to his parents' home in Ras El Amud, where he still lives. The well-kept house is made of 3 bedrooms, a small kitchen and a lavatory, and an enclosed balcony saved as a living room. In it live Ibrahim, his wife, and their son, Ibrahim's brother, who is disabled, and their elderly mother. The rest of the family and the children and grandchildren have moved out of Jerusalem after they started their own families. The years in Wadi Abdallah were filled with struggle and fear. They were the wars in his life. He lost his home, his livelihood, and his joy. As he said, I had nothing. Then I bought this tiny house and I was happy. I built 2 more rooms and I was happy. The demolition came and it brought me back to nothing. Demolishing a house is demolishing a dream. Ibrahim has still not given up. He got a new job as a bus driver, and he's still searching for a home to buy. This is one of the testimonies. I think it says enough. We don't have to add. So we will pass the talk to Natalia.
Hi, Efrat. Thank you. That's really touching and very powerful as well. So I'm going to share my slides with you now. Just bear with me a second. Okay, I'm going to share, I think this is the one. Okay, I think you should be able to see that now. And I'm going to go into full screen mode. Is that working correctly? Oh, I hope so. So as Jay was saying earlier, my chapter has to do like in this universe of identity mass-based violence that we've been discussing now. My chapter is related to the role urban planning has, and the title is Urban Planning with Identity: Exploring Alternative Methods and Possibilities for Preventing Identity-Based Mass Violence. And I'm going to take kind of a little step back just to go through some notions of space and place and all of these constructions that have been kind of shaping and feeding the discussion into spatial strategies for peace. So we know that violence shapes and transforms space, often reinforcing exclusion and insecurity. And identity-based mass violence has profound consequences for urban environments, altering social relations and spatial configurations. An identity of place is formed through a mix of meanings, experiences, actions, memories, and socialization. In a way, identity is imprinted in place through the uses of such space and by how identities are relational. We know that identity is deeply tied to place, shaping personal and collective experiences, and urban planning influences these dynamics, either fostering social cohesion or erasing community identities. In contrast, planning that ignores identity risk marginalization, risks marginalization and exclusion. This distinction between space and place is crucial because places hold meanings, histories, and identities, while space can be manipulated through planning to include or exclude certain populations. So identity of place speaks of how individual and community power relations are reflected in the environment and how power is disputed in the territory. And planning holds the potential to mediate this relation, but planning is rarely neutral. Thus, territory becomes a resource that is used to assert ethnic control, collective identity, and economic superiority. And in recognizing this, I'd like to point out the way that it was pointed out obviously before me, and I think it was around 1988 when Efrat had this very seminal paper recognizing the double-edged nature of planning. So we know that urban planning is rarely neutral, and I think that the case that Michal and Efrat presented now, it makes that very clear. It can be a tool for fostering inclusivity or a mechanism for structural violence. And in many cities, planning has been used to justify displacement, segregation, and resource allocation, privileging certain groups while excluding others. And recognizing these dynamics is crucial to avoid reproducing the very forms of violence that planning is meant to address. And I wanted to point out at this, the picture that you have on the upper right, because it's kind of what we, in the context of Mexico, what we recognize at planning, at institutional planning, like this mass production of houses that take very little into consideration in terms of identity and identity of place. So we have that while structurally exerted, identity-based mass violence has roots based on personal and collective identity, and this showcases the importance of understanding, systematizing, and incorporating individuals' perspective on, firstly, how identity is reflected in the territory, and secondly, how planners might implement strategies that prevent identity-based mass violence and help communities address and recover from these events. And this kind of dichotomy is something that was the how to say, like the conception of the chapter that I contributed here, like thinking about official and unofficial planning responses. because official responses tend to focus on urban upgrading, infrastructure provision, or crime prevention through environmental design. But these strategies can be flawed if they fail to engage with local identities. For example, where peace walls or separations are initially built for security, but they reinforce these spatial segregations and these negative dynamics. So in contrast, we have that unofficial responses emerge from grassroots efforts, such as neighborhood watch programs or community-led urban interventions. And this is a very famous picture now because it depicts quite a stark inequality, and the site where I got this is brilliant. If you'd like to have a look, it's called Unequal Scenes. So the idea here is to say that identity-based mass violence can also take the more inconspicuous form of territorial stigmatization, where communities associated with crime or poverty are structurally neglected. And this leads to underinvestment in infrastructure, policing strategies based on preconceptions, and policies that deepen these spatial inequalities. And in this context, I would like to introduce to you the case study that I've been working for a while now. It's called Campana Altamira here in Monterrey. And this has its origins as an informal settlement, but the community has a strong sense of identity, and it has been deeply affected by violence and territorial stigmatization. During the government of President Felipe Calderón in 2012, if you have a bit of context on Mexico, there was a strategy like a frontal battle against organized crime, and that kind of increased violence throughout the country. But one of the areas that were mostly affected was the city of Monterrey, and it had a period of extreme violence, or spectacular violence, as it has been called. And this area was particularly affected because criminal actors settled in the upper parts of the neighborhood. The neighborhood has a very complicated topography. So it has a couple of hills that are very steep. So this increased insecurity and led to external perceptions, like the imaginary of the city about this particular neighborhood equated the community with crime. So the stigma justified neglect by the state, reinforcing structural violence. However, with this strong sense of identity that the community had, residents actively challenged these narratives through community cohesion and artistic expressions, such as murals like Ave de los Sueños and festivals, and altogether like fostering a strong sense of community. This is the mural that was painted, and the upper parts of the hills are quite complicated still because of it's difficult to access. And up to 2020, there was no official census of those parts. And what we did here was the introduction of participatory visual methods as an alternative, because these methods provided an alternative approach to planning, allowing us to capture community perspectives on space, identity, and security. And the methods specifically used in this community were community mapping and orthophotography, or photography by the participant, which allowed residents to document how they experience urban space, to get to know and approach urban space through their perspectives. These approaches help planners move beyond preconceived notions of communities and instead engage with lived realities. In this neighborhood, revealed insights into how residents perceived insecurity, identity, and territorial belonging, offering a more nuanced understanding of place. This is one of the examples that we had that also had to do with asking participants to provide images or photographs of representative spaces within the community. So you have here, for example, a picture of Ave de los Sueños, and then you have mural done by that community. It's not visible here, but it says Campana on the far end here. So these images allow to grasp grasping the conceptualizations of space through communities' eyes, basically. And one of the advantages is that allows to grasp a more nuanced understanding of collective and community identity as it is attached to place, which allows bridging the gap between community understandings of place and broader planning processes. One of the main findings in Campana Altamira is that in spite of negative connotations associated with the neighborhood, residents inhabit the area proudly, and they build on a strong sense of identity, belonging, and community cohesion. And I'd like to wrap up signaling two issues here. So this is a story of how community cohesion, collaborative work, dignity, and identity converge to transform collective spaces in ways that go beyond the tangibleness of the built environment. And secondly, there's a contradiction that stems from proudly inhabiting and owning and claiming spaces in light of structural violence and attached territorial stigma, and violence based on identity expressed in a myriad way, which Campana Altamira has been subjected to. And the lack of participation of communities in planning processes exercises systemic and epistemic violence, feeding into cycles of increased territorial stigmatization based on the identities of communities. And through more inclusive bottom-up planning practices that recognize and celebrate identity, communities can appropriate or reclaim their spaces, fostering place identity, ownership, and empowerment, which might help mitigate structural and identity-based mass violence. Thanks very much. That's it on my part.
Thank you so much, Natalia, Michal, Efrat, Elsa. I am going to just take us right into questions. We've had a few come through the question and answer, and we do have a few additional minutes, so we'll be able to go for about the next 8 minutes or so with questions and answers. So there was a question that Elsa answered previously about looking at how Safe City considers what is submitted, and I think Elsa's response that trusting survivors is their main approach, but there's more detail. So I just want to draw everyone's attention to that question in the answered list there. There's also a question that Elsa answered about gender identity and how that influences planners, and we may return to that to give maybe Natalia, you a chance to answer that question as well. But first, let's go to the question from Mateo, which is really great and directed to you, Michal and Efrat, about this information and your perspectives and opinions on whether it is effective or could be effective at holding the government accountable. And then there's another question in there about what geospatial data is available and if it's up to date. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Those are great questions. So BIMCOM is an organization of planners, and what we do is do all kinds of spatial mapping and following all the data that comes out from the authorities. There is quite a lot of it. Not everything is out there. For example, when I say we don't know exactly how many housing units are in Jerusalem, that's a data gap. So we take this data and we work in many different ways to help communities fight off offensive planning, but also build their own planning concepts of how they see their future, how they see their development, what is their vision of development. So this is really a main focal of our work. You asked specifically about outposts, and we do have a small report about that. You can go on our website, and I hope it's there. I know it's in English, so it should be available. So definitely we follow, a lot of the things that are happening, but we're more focused on the planning processes, and there are other organizations who are more focused about, just collecting the data, and we work, of course, together. One last thing about challenging our government. So, the government here right now is cracking down on human rights organizations, our organization within that group. So we are having more and more difficulty challenging the government's work, but obviously that is our mission. So.
Thank you so much, Michal. I'll continue moving on. I know we could probably have these conversations for many more hours, but I really appreciate this question in here How does an urban planner's gender identity influence the design of inclusive spaces? Elsa, you've offered some response to that in writing. I'd love to give you a chance to say that out loud. And also, I'm not sure if others would want to come in to offer any of your reflections to that question.
Yeah, and I think they're all connected in a way. So I think it's very important to understand the nature of the problem, and therefore stories help, which is why Safe City is such a useful tool. And we collect data in a very structured manner so that you can understand the contributing factors to the violence. When it comes to urban planning, most of our cities or even transport is planned by men who do not have the lived realities that women have. And therefore, even though they may have learned certain principles in their education class when they were learning to be urban planners and transport planners, they may not necessarily apply it in real life. And I think, therefore, a gender perspective matters. I gave the example of the time of day where we have peak violence, but there are so many other examples. And I've also put in a toolkit that we had worked on some years ago on reimagining the city from a gender or a woman's perspective. Please go through it. It talks about certain principles. And finally, I think crowdsourced data, because there was a question on the validity of the data, but also what is the wish list. I think really on many topics, we don't have the disaggregated data. And in particular, when you're talking about sexual and gender-based violence, because of taboo and cultural norms, it's very hard to break the silence. So yes, we have to create a world where it's okay to talk about it, where it's okay to trust the survivors. And then at the end of the day, the way we look at the data is at patterns and trends. So that means it has to be a recurring event for it to be a pattern or a trend or show up in a pattern or trend. So whilst every individual story is important, the entire data set is equally important. Thank you.
Did anyone else want to come in on gender identity? Thank you, Elsa. I think you raised some really important insights there. I'll keep moving. We've got a lot of questions here. I wanted to come back to try to bring a couple of questions together. So Natalia, you just answered one in the question and answer about what motivates people to join these types of participatory processes. I wondered if you'd want to speak to that briefly. And I'd like to add to that also if there are any main lessons or insights you have about those participatory processes. So what engages people? Why do people show up to them? And what have we learned about using those processes?
Yeah, I mean, I was just typing away. I think, well, firstly, we were not paying participants to be in the activity. I think the most attractive or the main motivation behind this was the ability or the possibility to seizing a bit the narrative and portray their community through their visions, through their grasping of, because the activity or the exercise was comprised of several bits. So firstly, they were asked to map the most used transit walks and the paths that they followed. But they were also asked to map places related to identity, so that kind of allowed them to show the identity in a very graphic way as well of the community, in a way that it's more nuanced than the narrative or the imaginary that the city has of that. Because in the imaginary, like most people that I've spoken with, Monterrey is a very big city. It's like 5 million inhabitants. And in the imaginary of most people that know Campana Altamira, it's always a no-go zone. It's something like, it's very insecure. It's very complicated place to access. So for the inhabitants to be able to change the narrative and show the positives of the site, I think that was the most compelling. And And the second part of your question, I find trickiest to answer to, because there are many important lessons there. And I think one of the most powerful is that there are some, there's the individual component of thinking about place and identity of place, but there are many points of convergence. Like there are many points where community gets built, identity or community identity gets built, and I think that those are the ones that planning could kind of articulate in a way. I think that's the positive side of it, or the potential of these types of methods.
Thank you, Natalia, and thank you again to my colleagues here. It really has been such a joy and an incredible learning experience to work with each of these incredible women. So we are done now, and we'll hand it back to our organizers. But thanks so much for letting us participate in these conversations today.
I want to echo how incredibly powerful and touching and just impressive the work that you're all doing is. And certainly thanks to Jai-Ayla for navigating and moderating such a fantastic conversation. I'm sure we could talk about this for days. I wish we had more time. But I certainly thank you all for sharing your work and for being so impassioned about it, which now is the time, right? With respect for time, we're actually going to move forward to our workshop convener, Dr. Liu, here at the Center for Geographic Analysis. I'm very excited about this workshop because I think that what he's about to show you is going to be able to potentiate some of your work as you start to explore how spatial methods might be able to integrate into your specific workflows. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Lingbo Liu.
Okay, thanks, Erica, and thanks to all the panelists during this conference. So actually, my background is urban planner as well. So I'm now working on open geospatial data and software. So it's my honor to be here to show how visual program platforms can help you to do the data integration or data processing or data sharing, so which can better advance our atrocity prevention community. So without further ado, I will share my screen about my, so my slides here. Okay. I may need to switch my, so wait a minute, I need to switch the, what happened here? Okay. May need to close this tool because I have a 3 monitor. I need to shut off several of them and sorry. Okay, stop sharing, and I will share it again because 3 monitor. I just share one of them, so it has some issues there. Okay. Like why this does not work? This may be weird. Okay. What happens here? Okay. Okay, maybe I need to share another screen. So I share. I don't know why this screen things. So keep back and forth. And sorry. Here. Go to the second one screen.
We see our lovely program.
Yeah. I don't know why it's because I have 3 monitors. I don't know why it's always in another monitor. So I will try to switch that, duplicate that. Just I will try again to see what. Okay, I think okay. Screen. No, there should be something in place to allow me to screen. It should be. It's weird. So if I okay, so I will redo the sharing and
If we can't get it in a minute, we can see the slides, we just don't see it in presenter view.
yeah, it's so can I just close this one? And I will do the slide sharing first, and I share the screen. It's always in my another. Okay. Okay, now it's coming out. Okay. Okay, finally. Screen 3. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Perfect.
Okay, thanks.
There we
Sorry
go.
sorry for technical issue. So yeah. So hello everyone. So I'm Lingbo Liu. I'm a research associate at Harvard Center for Geographic Analysis. So my background is urban planning and health geographer. So now I mainly focus on the spatial and temporal science and developing open source software, and we developing case studies and also training workshops. So it's my honor to join this session. So as you know, during the morning session, we can say geospatial data is applied in various of aspects. So it can integrate with atrocity prevention, such as public service accessibility, social justice, or flooding, or economic and health, and transportation, and pollution, and climate change. So all those can be associated with location. So that means location and time is very important for data analysis. But it's a challenge for us. So there is a certain learning curve in geospatial information science education. So you might need to know, okay, how to handle those big data sets, how to handle vector data set, how to handle raster data set, how can I download the satellite image from the Google search engine or from a planetary computer. So I need no coding. And so if you want to process those data in a cloud environment, or maybe in a computer cluster, you also need to learn Linux. There should be another challenge. So if you have access to those computers, also need to learn, okay, what kind of package I need to use. So those are all challenges for us to use GIS or within a collaborating team. So that's a challenge for us. So the third one, I think in this morning session, even in the previous session, we're talking about in how to do the data, how we can make sure our data or research is replicable or reproducible. That's also important for us to do for atrocity prevention. So in in GIS domain, so the replicability is evolving from data sharing to software sharing, to metadata sharing, to workflow sharing, and container. So if you go to some cyber GIS, which is a very popular GIS platform, you can install or play the data directly. You don't need to care about the software package version or different kind of data source. You can learn from one-stop shop. So that's the trend for us. But for the education side, we need to extract key content from the workflow. So we need to extract the data and extract analysis. So those need to be replicable. And after that, it's not the end of the circle. We need to do more explanation, what to learn from this case study. Second step, we need to standardize what's the key component for us. We need to make this more accessible for our collaborator. So if I build a new package, how can I share this package very quickly to the whole community, so those can easily replicate my research during their domain? So that's very important for our education side. So this is a slide I displayed during our one collaboration with Signal team. So that's the spatial methods in atrocity analysis covered in one case study presented on the website. So you can see these slides contain several popular methods. One is hotspot analysis. Another one is cluster analysis, and also network analysis and suitability analysis. So those methods, if you want to learn, you need to start from ArcGIS Pro. You learn from that, because ArcGIS Pro is not free. It's not open source. Also, you need to have a place to access the data. And then you need someone teach you how to apply those methods. So those are my challenges for us if we want to do some atrocity analysis. So for example, the following slides are several very popular geospatial analysis techniques. First one is for point. So we need to do the clustering and analysis. So whether to know whether points are clustered or dispersed. We use arrange nearest neighborhood, which is an algorithm in ArcGIS Pro. We can also use replicate function to really capture, okay, what's the variance during the small distance and the large difference. So those ideas can also transfer to polygons. So where is the high value clustering and where is the no value clustering? Where is the hotspot for conflicts? And also we have another indicator. It's called spatial autocorrelation. So whether there exists some phenomenon for clustering events. For polygons, we also do local clustering features. So where's the outlier, where's the hotspot, where's the cold spot. And for the points, also have other methods such as density-based clustering or spatial constrained multivariate clustering. So those are different patterns we need to figure out when we do research on atrocity analysis. Then we have, so those two slides talking about spatial statistics. Now we have some modeling. So some model, famous model is GWR, which is geographically weighted regression. So those can tell you, okay, what's the variation for one coefficient during this surface. Another for points, we have another is called a collocation analysis. So in those points, for example, you know these are points with high risk of atrocity. And so what does other events associated with this event? So they have a point associated that one, so can use collocation analysis to capture that feature. Okay, those can help us to better predict what will be a next hotspot during those events. For this slide talking about the basic statistic description for the events. So for example, some central feature or linear directional mean. So what's if they have directions. Also, we have standard deviation, eclipse, and standard distance. Even these very simple algorithms can tell you very important informations. And we also have density and interpolation. So when you have several existing points, how can you do prediction on another location? So the kernel density or inverse density weighted algorithm can help you to do those predictions. So here's some examples. And the last one is about optimization and simulation. So during the last few, during the morning sessions, we're talking about how to allocate our resources to those locations. So those are also associated with location and the network and some algorithms provided by location allocation category in GIS ArcGIS Pro. Another one is called the agent-based model, so which have much more flexibility and also have much resourceful rules when you do the simulation. So that's some popular algorithms used in atrocity prevention and some popular GIS analysis domains. So why we taking visual programming as a solution? The first one is simple to understand, because even kids are playing visual programming, such as Scratch, so they can understand it very easily. Second one is when we use visual programming, each function will be seen as a node in a tree. So we can, with those structure, we can build a knowledge tree to let us better understand, okay, what's the evolution status for this domain, and what's the next branch we need to do some development. The second one is we can embrace our data sets, because we are in an emerging innovation period. So we need to embrace the general data sets. So for example, we can take other development in bioscience, in AI, in the data science, or geography, geophysics, or life science. All those areas can be inspire us to do more or maybe innovation in our current domain. So that's our general idea. So here is a map to show the difference between traditional Python-based analysis workflow and the visual programming. So on the left hand, you can see we have a 4-9 when you read the data to group by, to merge and sort. So you can see in the backend you have several 9. Actually, they have a different data in the backend, and also they have a linkage, but it's invisible. When you have like 1,009 of code, how can you know which data is exactly you need to handle? So if you switch your eye to the right-hand side, there is a structure for visual programming. That's very simple. So each dot is data, is a function, and each line is a data flow. So it's a very simple structure. You can understand, okay, where's the data goes to which function, and where is the result from which function. So that's very intuitive for us to understand. Also, the interface for those nodes is very intuitive. You can easily click that and reconfigure that and run the workflow. So we use a metaphor to compare those nodes, component, and workflow. So each function can be seen like a blocks, like Lego blocks. We combine them together. They can work as a component. When you can combine component together, there will be a workflow. And those workflow can be reused by others. So if I extract, so for example, now I'm working on extracting file data from Google Search Engine. So now I can copy this workflow for others. So they can revise the date, and also they can revise the data source. Then they can get a different data from based on my the original workflow. So that's the beauty of workflow and the visual programming. So visual programming is not a new thing. Actually, if you are familiar with ArcGIS Pro, the model builder is visual programming. But if you want to learn model builder, you need to learn ArcGIS Pro first. And also the dialogue is a little bit complicated for the beginners. Then we have other alternatives. So we have Orange and also Ottih and RapidMiner. Here we will introduce LIME as a solution because it's open, it's free, and it also supports cloud computing. So that's why we choose LIME as our collaborator to developing visual programming for geospatial analysis. So those are maps showing how we can use this Lego toys to build GIS or geospatial analysis easily. So YLAM, as I mentioned, that is a lower coding barrier for data science. There, it has like more than 2,000 built-in nodes for end-to-end data science. Second one is an open source platform, and it's a visual structure workflow and cloud server support. So this is the node in line. So they including nodes for reading, writing, and also for the data manipulation, which is mainly for the data pre-processing. And then we have a data view and a data modeling in the second slide. Yes. So you want to do some spatial clustering, do deep learning and machine learning. It's very easy for you to use. It's very handy. You just drop and drag and drop, and then link the data there and run the workflow. You will get a result. Also, it has a fast growing community. So you can see where they have provided H2O, machine learning methods, deep learning, and XGBoost and other popular algorithms. The last one is called machine learning interpretability, which is for explaining AI, which is also useful for you if you want to do to explore the relationship between different variables when you're using machine learning algorithms. So here is the geospatial analytics extension for LAM, which is developed by our center, so Harvard Center for Geographic Analysis. So now we have 12 categories, which covered almost the most popular geospatial tasks in our daily usage. So from input, the first one is spatial input and output. Second one is spatial calculation, manipulation, transformation. Also have visualization. And I think the most interesting one is called open data set. So we are building open data set nodes. That means you can use one node to query all the geospatial data from all the world, such as we have an OpenStreetMap data set. So that means you can just input a name for a city. Then you run this node, you will get the boundary or get the road network from this domain, which is based on OpenStreetMap. So that is very convenient. Also, we also build a new node. It's called Harvard Dataverse Search and Download. That means you can use a node to query all the data set shared on Harvard Dataverse. And then you can download that directly within this workflow and run and to replicate the research provided by the authors if they share the data on the Harvard Dataverse. So here I will go very quickly about all those features. So those are the nodes in our extension. So from input, output, calculation, manipulation. So you can see we have a spatial join and overlay, which is very popular. Have a spatial transformation from different type geometry to each other. And we have exploratory spatial data analysis and spatial modeling and the location analysis, which I showed in the previous several slides, talking about how to do the location allocation task. So here you can, on the right hand side, you can see the open data set. We have 3 OpenStreetMap nodes. Here we are, a US data set is also on this node. Actually, we have, so this is 1.2. Now we have 1.3 or new nodes for open data set. I will share you on the later. So here I will quickly go through our spatial data map, the nodes or the features in this extension. So first of all, the key feature for this software is tabular structure. So you can say each data set, when they are transferred during different node, it will be seem like a table. You can see the different field or column header and the values and also geometry associated with that. So that means you can easily create your own geometry or spatial data in line by a table. This is for geospatial for GeoFile reader. You can read shapefile, GeoJSON, GeoParquet, and GeoPackage. So we support most open source geospatial data file format. And the important feature of this node, it can read online zip file directly. So if you want to read, for example, here, so on the right hand side we have US government, so Tiger Line, which Tiger Line URL, you can just paste this URL into this node and read that directly. You will get the data from online source. It can be also write the data to a local computer. Second one is we can also save them as a package. So save several files together. So this category is talking about spatial calculation. So this nodes will help you to calculate area, length, coordinate, bounds, and the total bounds with a very intuitive configuration interface on the right-hand side. So, then we have bounding box and canvas hell, 9 endpoints and binary union help you to calculate the boundaries of your the geometry in each rows. For the spatial manipulation, we have buffer, simplify, create a grid. So this is very important if you want to do some raster-based visualization. Also, we have multiple ring buffer and clip, nearest join, spatial join, and true distance calculation nodes here. So this slide is showing a very typical configuration interface for spatial join. So you need to input two geometry from two table and choose a join mode and choose a match mode. And then you can choose which column you want to include. Then you will get a result. So it's much easier for you to understand how those geospatial nodes are working and what's the key parameter you need to tell others. So that's the intuitive side of visual programming. So these are spatial relationship. So I will skip this one. I don't want to. So here is talking about spatial transformation. So we can transform from polygon to point, or line to point, or line to multi-point, or polygon to line, or multiple to single part. We can also create random points based on population during inside a polygon. Then we can do projection. So this is very popular. So from Mercator to WebGIS projection system. We also another very welcome nodes. It's called a pointer to line, which is very important for you to rebuild GPS-based trajectory into a line. So those for spatial transformation. So on the left side this is the configuration interface. So for example, this is for create a random points. If you have a 4 polygon, you input the geometry, which is the 4 square, and then input the column as a population. So they will generate random points inside those points. So second one is pointer to line. The next one is spatial conversion. You can use geocoding or reverse geocoding to do the from text address to coordinates. And then we have spatial visualization. We have 4. The first one is geospatial view. So you can use this one as a default one. But we also have a power one. It's capital geo view. So we embedding capital geo views framework into our node. So you can do very fancy visualization. So here is the visualization based on capital geo view inside this LAM geospatial extension. So the next one is exploratory spatial data analysis, which can calculate the spatial weight and calculate auto correlation index. Next one is spatial modeling. So you can do ordinary least square regression, linear regression with spatial test. You can also do spatial area model, spatial lag model, or geographic weight regression model, or multi-scale geographic weighted model as well. The next one is called location analysis. So those is important for you to optimize facility locations based on certain criteria. For example, if you want to choose 5 hospitals to vaccinate citizens to minimize the total travel cost. Then we also have the spatial network nature to calculate the travel distance or time based on the road network. If you want to use Google distance, you need to provide API key, but open source routing machine project is free, and it also is very accurate. If you have your own network, you will use this one. The next category is called spatial clustering. You can calculate the mean center with standard deviation ellipse for those points. And also you can, for polygon data set, you can do spatial clustering based on the following algorithms. So yeah, the next one is I mentioned is open data set. It's very convenient. And actually now US Bureau, since Bureau just updated their protocol, so we don't need to API key now. You can just use a node, query data directly. So we also have one book associated to this software. So the book is Computational Method in GI and the GIS Application in Social Science. So the main book is based on ArcGIS Pro, and we have a lab manual based on Lime. So that's the so that's you can learn from there. And we also have some comparison based on between these two books. So actually in the Ranger book, we have like a 14 chapter. But if you see the nodes used in Lime, you will see most of the nodes are not specific for GIS functions. They are for general data science. So that's why we would like claim that we need to embrace the general data science to work together to make data science available to all the disciplines rather than only geospatial. So if you go to Lime, and Lime is free, and Lime Hub is also free. You can go there and to download all the workflow associated with this book and play with it. If you want to learn some basic example, you can go to the geospatial analytics example to do that. So now I have some demo videos for this one. For example, if we want to figure out, okay, it's a noon, I want to find some place to have lunch. So we need to find the location here. I want to to create a buffer zone around my location, and then we do the POI to query data set. Okay. Okay, so here I will, yeah. So here is more like building Lego. So we have Lego blocks. We create a table, and then we transfer them into use geocoding, transfer into a natural longitude coordinates, and then we do the projection, convert them to a degree to meter based unit. Then we create a buffer zone to query data. Then we use OpenStreet POI to query data and then do the geospatial view. So here is the demo video. So when you open the Lime, you might need to create a workflow and input name for that. And this interface for this workflow, you can drag a node and drop into the canvas. So double clicking that, you can edit that. So here I will add a column name first. It's called address. Then I will input the location of our centers building. So it's here. Okay, when you finish that, you can execute that one. So we have a table on the no end. Then we choose geocoding, link that. We'll choose the address and then choose the service provider. The first one is free. So then you will generate a location for that. So you can say there's a geometry associated with this node. Then we use the projection node to convert the coordinate system from natural longitude to meter-based unit. So this is also WebGIS projection system. Then we convert them to meters. So EPSG is changed. Now we use a buffer. So as I mentioned, we can use 2,000 meter as a buffer zone to create a circle around us. We choose the meters. And then we run that one. Then we use this circle to query the restaurants around us. So here we use OpenStreetMap QIS, so point of tree interest. So link this and Then we choose buffer and choose amenity and the restaurant as the tab text and run that. This will take like 1 minute, but these are edited video, so you can see it's quite fast. And then we will use geospatial view to visualize that one. So here, when you go to the interface, you can choose the columns you want to keep to show, and then we can change the market size and run this workflow. So you will see the map when you do the visualization. So these are the restaurants when we can go within 2,000 meters. Okay. So then another one, next one is for choose 3 locations for vaccination. So if, for example, we have 6 demand and 6 candidate location, so we'll use input supply data and demand data, calculate distance, and do the pivot, and use a join to join the demand population to this table, and then we use p-median node to calculate calculate result. So here is the other demo. So here, so actually NIME, it has 2 different interfaces. The previous one is called a modern UI. This one is called a flexible UI. So you can create a workflow, which a group, which is like a folder here. And then you can create, then you inside this folder, you can create a workflow for that. So workflow is the main file format you share with others. So during this workflow, we can create data here. So we also use some, table creator to do. So as I mentioned that we can take geometry data as a table in NIME. So we input the demand ID and the demand capacity and also change the type. So the type should be number, integer, or others. So this is a geometry. So besides, you can create your own geospatial dataset. You can also read the geospatial dataset directly, as I mentioned, with GeoFile Reader. So here's the supply data, so which is the location for the hospitals. Now we use Euclidean distance. Choose the geometry and the ID for each column or for each row, and then choose the unit. Then we calculate distance between each other. Next step, we will join the table back. But before that, we need to do the pivot. That means we convert an OD list to an OD matrix. So which you can also say from a white table from a long table to a white table. So I'll join the table back. So this is the data joining. Then we use a node to solve this problem. We choose the different population, choose the different hospitals here, and then we get a result. Yes, so the one that the value in for one is what the nodes choose. Okay, so this is the second node for second demo video for the location allocation, which you also use for atrocity prevention. And okay, so here is another one. I think it should be very interesting. So how we can build a online dashboard. So this note is creating a grid for you to summarize all the facilities around the world on the map. So those selection widget is for you to create an interface for the users. It's more like WebGIS application. So here we calculated all the restaurants inside each polygon and aggregate them to visualize the final data. And now we summarize all the restaurants at each grade. So last step. So you can say basically with this structure, we can visualize all the facilities. So this is a WebGIS application. You can input any place to visualize the facilities around the world. Okay. So this is for Brazil. Okay. What happened?
We're back to the schedule again, Dr.
Yeah,
Lewis.
yeah. I just noticed that. I think I still need to say, okay, maybe I can.
That's okay. We are bumping right up against time. That was a ton of super fast spatial analysis.
Yes. Okay.
I think if you have
I have 2 more slides and one demo.
Go for it.
Yeah, okay. So maybe I can just move back and share another screen. Wait a minute. So probably stop sharing. I will share this screen.
I know a lot of people are likely overwhelmed by what is being shown. We are certainly going to share all of the resources. I don't know anybody who can do spatial analysis nearly that fast.
Yes, totally agree with that.
We'll share. Basically, the whole objective of this is to show how powerful this tool is and then get you in touch with the resources so that you can start playing around with it. So don't feel like, as participants, you have to be able to follow every click and drag and function. But
Yes. Okay, so those are, so these are references. So if you are interested, so because slides were shared with you, so you can go through those reference. And so these are books and a website. If you are interested, you can go to the website. So last one is about a very quick demo. So what you can do is, so this is finished this morning. So I want to know how to, so for the Atrocity, so in online, we have a notes called, maybe I can, so we have a GDAL global knowledge graph. So here you can double click and choose the topic you want to do. So self-identified atrocity, you can query data from the global data source in a real time or near real time. So I'm now searching for the last 24 hours, the news in the world. Then I can, so this is a visualization for all the points they have. So we have like 20, you can see we have 2,500 rows for this doc, for those news reports or website informations. Now we can also do aggregation. So we use a word map and to spatial join those data set to do the calculation. So in each country, what's the total number of those events? So here is the geospatial visualization for those one. So here, so on the right-hand side, you can see the legendary. So the highest one is like 188 to 800, or it's quite a lot. I think it should believe is around here. Yes, it's yes, here. Yes. So it's still Gaza and here place. But you can also see it for the world. And another thing is in LIME, you can also use web content crawling, because those data set, you can say, they have a URL attached to each URL and location to each event. We can query data from website. So here I use web interactions data to query data set and get content here. So you can see here is one of the content. So it's for the paragraphs. So how can do deal with those data set? We can use large language models. Here I use two large language model. One is from is a local model, so it's an offline model, DeepSeek, deployed on my local computer with Olama, and then we can we use Olama to parse the data set. So this is my prompt here. So I want it to give me a sentimental score, give me to the location and to the summary for those for this whole web for this whole content. Then it can generate the result here. So here's a response from DeepSeek. So it's very long, so but it's trunked. So I don't. So but it's not so. It's not good with. So this result is not I expected. So I then use OpenAI's API to apply the prompt again to those updated result, because this result is really huge. But with the local model, we can decrease our cost, because if we use OpenAI to do, it will cost you a lot of money. But I use the local model, it should be fine. So that means we use local model to decrease the information, then use online model to do more precise results. So here is the result. So based on that, so you can see this is very accurate. So this is a final result of that. So on the low one, you can see this is a location from Rwanda and Belgium. So this is a summary for this content, and also a sentimental score for this web page content. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all from my side. And thank you, everyone. And as I point out, and it's a very overwhelming slice, but I will share with you and just glance for this software. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. I feel like that was quite the whirlwind. Really appreciate you showing such a powerful tool, though. I think that we've got a lot of folks who are going to go and maybe look at the lab manual, maybe go to the website, watch some videos, play around with the tool. I know I personally want to spend some more time playing with it because I struggle with my ArcGIS every day. And so it would be very interesting to see how incredibly powerful this is. I also am thinking maybe at some point we start integrating the humanitarian data exchange data into this, maybe ACLA data, maybe PRIO data, but those are conversations for another day. So thank you again. Certainly there'll be lots of processing that happens amongst all of our participants, but I mean, I feel like that's just been our day, folks. Today it is 12:15 my time, and I feel like today has just been an exceptional amount of information, an exceptional amount of insight, emotions, so many different things. We've learned so much. And honestly, presenter view. So this has been our journey today. We had a very powerful keynote speaker this morning, and then we went on to hear about the role of geospatial data on programs and policy from Rosecolette from PIND. We moved on to talk about kind of the intersection between armed group activities, cross-border movements, and refugee flows in the DRC. And then we had an exceptional panel on spatial strategies for preventing identity-based violence in urban contexts and really bringing in kind of some of these other experts in the space, right? And so it's really thinking about like bringing urban planners into atrocity and conflict prevention. It's spectacular. It just really speaks to how we really want to break down these silos, because we've got so many different people from so many different perspectives kind of working on kind of common shared problems. And then lastly, our workshop tomorrow is probably going to be just as much of a whirlwind, and I'm so excited about it as well. This is our schedule for tomorrow. Again, it's on our website. We will be talking about conflict risk and natural resources. We'll be thinking about informal markets in the Sahel. Tomorrow we have our first Student Ignite session, which I'm super excited about, where we bring together students. They, in Wham Bam session, present their work, and then we have some discussion about it. Then we'll be talking about the impacts of drought on violent conflict, and then also thinking about anticipating starvation as a method of warfare and forced displacement. So again, a really packed day tomorrow. I really hope you join us. Lastly, please share your thoughts on today's event if you will not be here tomorrow. We are sharing this link again tomorrow, so if you are able to join us, you can fill it out tomorrow. But with that, I am going to say a great big thank you to everybody who is here, to everybody who has participated, to everybody who has presented, and we will see you again tomorrow. Thank you.